Our next keynote speaker, he's a native Finn. He's a Silicon Valley-based tech CEO. He's a veteran of the open source movement. And now, most recently, he's a white hat hacker. So please welcome Mårten Mickos, the CEO of HackerOne.
Thank you, Birger. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for this amazing event. It's fantastic to be here today. My name is Mårten Mickos. I'm the CEO of HackerOne in San Francisco today, eagerly connecting with all of you online. And the topic of today is the role of tech in society, or the role of society in tech, which used to be not an issue at all because tech did its own stuff and society did its own stuff. But today, with software taking over everything in the world and everything being based on the digital world, suddenly the role of tech is intermingled with the role of society, and we have to figure out how to make them work together because they are not separate any longer. And two other things that are separate is the Nordics and the US West Coast. I grew up in Scandinavia. I feel like a true Nordic citizen, and at the same time I feel very much at home in California and on the US West Coast. And we sometimes say here that when we compare and contrast the two cultures, because both cultures, both the Nordic culture and the one we find here on the West Coast, have the ingredients for a wonderful society of the future, but neither has really achieved it yet. But the ingredients are there. And maybe the starkest contrast is that when we say that in the Nordics, 1 million is a lot of money, but in America, an hour is a long time. And every time when I deal with Nordics or with people here, that's the difference. It's the difference of how they view time and what is the most scarce resource. In the Nordics, we always do it the frugal way. We always save money. We never tip much. We never overpay. We make sure it's all very economical. And on the US West Coast, when we build tech companies and otherwise, the only thing that we can't get back is time. You can get back lost money, you can get back lost resources, lost opportunities, but lost time will never come back. So there's a distinction there in mindset, which creates a very compelling, contrasting, and complement of two cultures that look at things differently and achieve amazing things in their own rights, but in different ways. And when we then think about where we are today with tech and society, we often speak, both in the Nordics and here, about the need to keep regulation down, that regulation is bad and regulation will stifle innovation or stifle business. But I would claim that the fact that software is eating the world, as it were, is now causing us to be forced to regulating and building our principles for society into legislation that guides how software works. Because we have to make sure that the collective interests are taken care of while privacy is protected. We have to allow cloud vendors and social media companies to collect data, but we cannot let them abuse the data they own. Data may be the new oil of the industry, but it's also the plutonium. It can be very toxic in the wrong place. So I say that if our lives are governed by algorithms, then algorithms must be governed by law. Again, an old Norse tradition, we always said that land and our nation must be built on law. That is the way you build a society. And I think we've come to a time where we have to regulate how algorithms work. We should not regulate business. To build business should be free, as in free capitalism, and companies should fight it out between each other. But the algorithms are not business. They affect our daily lives and the nature of our Western liberal democracy. So we have to protect it through law. And when we discuss this, many times we claim that there's a challenge in getting the interest of the individual matched with the interest of the collective, or the interest of the capitalist matched with the interest of the employee, or we say that there's a conflict between short-term goals and long-term goals. I don't believe in any of those conflicts, essentially. I think if there's a conflict, it's because of greed and myopic self-interest. And the longer view you take, the easier it is to bridge those differences. So the longer the view, the less at odds are the interest of the individual and the interest of the collective. So when we now look at privacy, the GDPR legislation, and we say what's right and what's wrong here, if we try to solve it for today, we may have a conflict. If we say what we would like society to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, suddenly we will realize that we have more in common than we have opposing each other, and we will figure out how to solve it. And that is the way to solve those difficult societal problems. Now, coming back to what we do here on the US West Coast, we act very quickly, so we don't always take the long-term view. And this is where the Nordics can teach us a long-term horizon and the foregoing of some immediate benefit that is just a short-term temporary benefit in the interest of the long-term benefit. And I would like to round up with a principle that I learned back in Finland and in Scandinavia when I lived there, where we essentially say that when everyone is doing fine, everyone is actually doing better. And the meaning here is that we are all in the same pool. We're all in the same swimming pool. It's the same water for everybody, wherever you are. We have just one planet. And when we who have resources or who are strong or who are capable for the moment, when we support those who are not and we make sure everybody is fine, then actually we make sure that everybody is better because it benefits ourselves as well. And with that, applying that principle, you can institute corporate social responsibility without harming the very practical goals of capitalism and profit making. You can do both and you can still be a responsible citizen. And I think that is something we have to define now in the digital world. And in a way, at our company, we hack computer systems, but I actually call out to all of you to hack society. We have to hack society for good now. We have to figure out a new way to define it because COVID is pushing us into the digital world faster than we could ever have imagined. And we need to figure out the rules of the game there. And they have to be legislated into strict rulings that nations and governments will agree on. So with that, thank you from San Francisco. It's a wonderful event. I really enjoy the morning keynotes, the talk about sustainability, humility, honesty, innovation. Those are all topics close to my heart. So over to you, Birger.
Thank you, Mårten. What an inspiring keynote you've given us today. I want to start out with one question for you myself. So I sense that you have a lot of passion around this balance between collaboration and competition, between a zero-sum game and a joint pursuit of a joint target type of game. And I'm wondering, in your personal work, in the kind of crucible of capitalism, how have you managed to, and how have you tried to make this balance come alive in your companies?
Thanks for asking. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I finally felt good when I realized it's not a balance. Balance is the wrong word. It's a contrast. Like, if I put salt and sugar in food I'm preparing, I'm not trying making the sugars feel salty or the salt be sweet. I will let them drive their own interests in the food, and it's more delicious with both of them present. And it's the contrast that can be delivering that thing. So a lot of times we think something needs to be sort of watered down into a compromise and consensus, and we should allow for the contrast. And that is what I've learned on the US West Coast, where there's such diversity, plurality, so many different things, and people just readily accept that everything is different, and it is in the contrast of the different things that we get the great results. And I'm thinking, if it applies to human beings, it must apply more broadly. And that's how I can bridge the gap with things that seem so difficult to bridge. And I realize those who are opposed to it, they're just greedy. They're just lazy or greedy, or not realizing that they're shooting themselves in the foot by asking for an immediate favor when they should make sure that they get a good future.
So it's a false choice. You actually have to do both, because that's how you get that great blend that has a contrast.
That's my belief. I could be wrong, but that's my conviction.
Thank you. I think an audience question here is a little bit along the same line. How could we apply the cooperation between Nordic companies and the government and science establishment here in the US?
It's a good question. I think the US might already be doing it. I think what I've seen, I haven't seen all of US, I've mostly seen California, but I see a very good collaboration between academia and business in the US, and I even see academia and government. I do think for all its weaknesses, the governance model of the United States is flexible, and people, you see the same people straddle those sides, and academic people go into government and government people come into academia. So I think it's in pretty good shape, actually. I'm not sure what I would improve there. I'm sure there's stuff to improve, but I don't have a concrete idea.
It sounds like you're very fundamentally an optimist, present conditions notwithstanding.
I think it's the only way to live. Yes, I do. But I am a paranoid optimist. I force myself to face the hardest and harshest scenarios. And I'm a big fan of this concept called the Stockdale paradox. And I urge you to read about it, where, like now in COVID, you have to be considering how bad it truly can get. And although we talk about innovation and sustainability here, we have human beings dying around us now in COVID-19. So we mustn't stay away from it. We mustn't become Pollyannish and be just optimistic. There has to be a grounding in reality. But when you are there, then you realize that the only way to conduct life, and if you believe in free will, then you are an optimist, I think.
Thank you, Mårten. Thank you for a great keynote, and look forward to seeing you in the flesh in next year's Innovation Summit.
Thank you.